Yeah.
It's interesting. So a lot of things that we want to make in the world require, some things require vision, some things require effort, and most things require both, right? And a lot of the visions that we have need more people and more hands to execute than
Yes.
what we have, right?
Yeah.
And it's a thing where in some companies you'll notice, you'll look at, sometimes there are people who are working there who are just working there for a paycheck, and it's fine, and they're just giving their labor, their skills, their hands, their talent, to
Yeah.
help you get that dream done and such. But it doesn't have to be their dream. It doesn't really have to. Like, it's okay if they can do a great job and it's not their passion per se, but they can do a great job with it still, And it doesn't always have to be where everybody, though. I think everybody doesn't have to be so emotionally invested in what they're doing. Um, that's a great privilege if that's where you are. But sometimes people just
Yeah.
want the paycheck so that they can go and do the things that are the things that refill them emotionally and spiritually and socially and that sort of thing. It doesn't have to be that
Yeah.
it's all in one.
Yeah. And I would even add to that it can get very dangerous then when there are like multiple sides to this, right? Because especially within the startup space, but I mean big
Mm.
companies do this too. I'm sure I see the PR, I see the marketing, I know that they do it, but I don't really work with those companies, so I can mostly talk to the smaller ones. But there are, like, these like purpose driven or mission driven companies or what have you,
Mm.
um, and they will very often. I'm trying not to generalize, but I have seen this a lot, and I think that we have to be very careful with this, both as individuals who work for these companies, but
Mm.
also like as the people running these companies. We have to be very careful because this kind of thing of like, oh, somebody is only here for the paycheck. Do we really want this person? I'm like, if that person is contributing with their skill and with their knowledge and with their labor, then yes, you want that person, right?
Yeah.
Like because that can very, very easily turn into this whole like emotional blackmail. And like
Absolutely.
I have seen
Absolutely.
that. I have seen that so often when like purpose-driven companies or whatever, like social impact companies, are like, you have to really care about this. You have to be really, really passionate about that. And I think that there is a lot of sense to what they are talking about in the sense that, of course, like if we are working for XYZ social impact, then we do need the insight that comes from caring about that.
Yeah.
Yes, but and maybe, I don't know, we will see what the right conjunction is when I reach the end of this sentence. But so the thing is that 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 attitude can very easily turn into this policing of sort of like, oh,
Mm.
if you're not working overtime, then you don't care enough. You have to prove to me that you care enough. If you're not putting in extra time, effort, if you're not working for free, if you're not, or just like if you're not okay with getting like a low paycheck for something, then you don't care enough. Then maybe you don't want to. And like it becomes this constant of, you have to prove that you care enough about the mission or the purpose of the company or what have you. And that can get very dangerous very fast, because then it's not just going to impact that of like my perception of whether or not the employees here care enough about the thing, but it can also very easily turn into something that is really, really harmful to especially marginalized employees, because then it just suddenly becomes like, well, if you're not giving me, like, I mean, if you are the only trans person on a team, right,
Mm.
and you are, let's say, a developer, your job is to write code. That's what you
Mm.
do. But then HR keeps coming to you. Well, if you're big enough to have HR, but you know what I mean. So like people keep coming to you and say like, so how do I use this pronoun? How do I do this thing? So give me, then you are essentially also performing DEI work, right? On the time, on the side
Mm.
that you don't get paid for. It takes time away from your actual duties. And so you're suddenly like the professional trans person at the company. And if you say no, and I'm sure that this goes for every other marginalized identity too, right? Like, let's be real. Then you're suddenly like the professional, marginalized person at your company, and then you have to like provide that knowledge, that insight, what have you, that you might not have. That's just no. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you have the skills or not. Actually, I'm just going to say that it doesn't matter if you have the skills, the knowledge, if you have that sort of like DEI capacity to do it. it's not in your job description, you don't get paid for it, and it takes time away from the actual job that you will get judged on. And
Absolutely.
then
I've definitely
when
seen that happen.
right, and when you
Yeah.
say no, I'm sorry, like this is not a part of my job, then suddenly it's like, oh, you don't care about the people like you. It becomes this emotional manipulation,
Well, you
and
know
it's
what
not
though?
on purpose,
Can I
but it
say,
happens.
I really fundamentally dislike when DEI people, well-meaning folks, they, like for instance, when they're building out the ERGs, right?
Hmm.
And 9 times out of 10, you're not paying those people. And it takes so much time. And people are basically event organizing. They're doing a lot of your internal communication type things. They're doing a lot of actual
Hmm.
jobs, within things. And they're not getting compensated for it. And from as a DEI leader, it's a really weird space where you try to in some ways there's emotional coercion to try to get people to participate in these kind of things. And it's kind of funny because for me, I think those things ought to exist. I will
Yes.
encourage that,
Yeah.
ERGs do exist. It's nice to be able to build out safe spaces where you can actually listen to and get feedback from different groups and this kind of thing that can help
Yeah.
affect your policies and your practices and your ways of working and how you can support folks. Love that. Great. Don't expect everybody's going to join that. Do not expect that. Like, don't
No.
automatically try to put people into these things. Do not, that's not what
Nope.
everybody needs in their professional experience. It's not what everybody wants in their professional experience. I mean, I
And
know
it's
my
heavy.
own, it's
Yeah.
heavy. Yeah.
It's heavy emotional labor. It's very
Mhm.
heavy emotional labor. You are asking people to volunteer that heavy emotional labor, and there will be people who feel very strongly about it and will be willing to, and maybe even do it with great, great enthusiasm. And that's amazing. You are very lucky. If you do not have the resources to pay them, then you make sure that you adjust any sort of performance or whatever that you are expecting of them accordingly,
Yeah.
so that they can do the ERG work within their working hours.
One thing
That's
I
the minimum
definitely,
you can do.
one thing I did like, I was working with this one company where we ended up doing essentially having ERG work as being one of the things that you can look at as a criteria for leadership development. But there are certain things where people are looking to get promotions in the company. They're trying to build out how do they have their growth program, and there has to be demonstrations of leadership. There has to be something where you're talking about how have you done these things, and that was one of those things that you could use as evidence to be able to say, hey, look, I've done this. So that was one of these things that was a a prerequisite for promotion for certain areas and such, which is a great thing. You can take something like this and make that something that you can have a positive valuation for as you do those feedbacks and things like this. If you can do that, if you can integrate that in, fantastic. There has to be some tangible benefit, because if you're just doing it for yourself, if you're just doing this for your company's name and your employer branding, etc., but not doing it in a way that concretely adds value to people who are participating in it, then that is performative. That is exactly
Yes,
what that means,
yes,
So it has to
yes,
be built in a way that it actually adds value to the people that you're intending to
yes,
create value for. And you can't do that without thinking about how can you integrate the incentives for this? How can you, if you're not going to pay them, then you should probably pay them realistically, depending on
yes,
like what level of participation they have. Um, if you're not paying them though, think about how can you help boost them in the way they're trying to grow, how they're trying to develop, how can this actually be something that's concretely going to improve their experience, you know, and that's a thing that you have to look at. It's
yeah,
something where if you don't do that, then you are absolutely taking advantage of folks. And that's something
yes.
that it it should feel uncomfortable for, people like us. And I hope it does, because it is not a good thing.
No, no, exactly. And it's so important to well, you cannot guarantee anybody's safety, right? And like
Mm.
having a safe space is also never a guarantee. You can strive to have it, but the thing is also with ERGs, you have to absolutely make sure that you build trust with those groups. You have to make sure that you protect the people who are in those groups,
Mhm.
because I'm not an ERG expert. I don't have extensive experience with ERGs in
Mm.
any way. I don't like, it's not part of sort of like my professional offering either, because
Mm.
I do have opinions, but I don't have that expertise that would be like very helpful there. But I do feel very strongly about, like, these people are doing very, very heavy emotional labor, and and you have to make sure that they are never coerced into doing it. You have to make sure that 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 they have trust, that you have trust for them. You have to make sure that whatever they come up with, that it's actually listened to. And what you said, like it cannot be performative. It cannot, like, but most of this work is like that. We cannot we cannot be performative, because ultimately it's not just that it's not going to have the impact that we hope it would. It can also cause harm. Like performative work within this space, it causes tangible harm. It
It does.
destroys trust. It creates more workplace trauma, especially for marginalized people. It like existing today in this economy, existing under capitalism, existing under all of the systems and structures that we exist under. And here's the thing, like, I maybe this is controversial or whatever, but like existing under white supremacy as well. Like, yes, as a white person, I definitely benefit from a lot of white supremacy, but it also is traumatizing to everybody to exist under white supremacy, because it is extremely dehumanizing to people of the global majority, to Black people, to brown people, to, like, look, like, it's extremely traumatizing. I'm not comparing those experiences at all, but I think that it's very important for white people also to realize that white supremacy also has a dehumanization mechanic built in for us, and that we are put into this place to keep promoting and upholding this system that also doesn't really, like, yeah, we do benefit from certain things in it, but is it really worth it? Because ultimately, when I look at it, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. I'm sorry, it's messed up. Like, the benefits are not all that great, if we're being completely honest about it, because, like, existing under capitalism, which is, I'm sorry, it's inseparable from white supremacy and colonialism and coloniality as a concept, like, in my mind, and also historically, and also in many other people's minds. So it's not just an opinion, but, like, these things are very, very closely interlinked. They are interlinked systems. And the thing is that apart from, say, a handful of people, it is traumatizing to exist under capitalism for all of us. This constant scarcity, this constant insecurity, the material insecurity, the financial insecurity, the toxic workplaces. This is why, like a core part of the work that I'm trying to do is to imbue people with imagination. Like, please imagine better ways of working, right? Like, please dare to imagine something else than what we have today, because I promise you there are 150 ways out there that are better than what we have today. And some of those may be even possible in our current systems. Like, some of those we might even be able to implement. But this is like whatever we are doing today, we've been doing it for over 100 years, and it has not worked for anyone except for Elon Musk, maybe. But at this point, I'm also questioning that. So, like, come on.
I know, you can be king of, the ashes if you like, but the fact is you need to burn the world down just to be able to feel, value.
Yes.
Here's the thing. I come from the States, right? And it's a very hard thing when I talk to my family and people back home and such about, the idea that maybe the system that we exist in over there is not the best system for people, because the idea is this whole feeling of getting ahead, it's so ingrained on us. Like, we have to get ahead. You got to work hard and you got to game the system. If you're really, really smart, you'll be able to find your ways out. And if you really thought about something in advance, you should have thought about this like before you were born. You would have been able to plan for this, prepare for this, and save up for this, and da da da. It's that level of, like, it's all your fault in that sense if you don't make it. And that's the perspective of things. And it's this weird thing where the goal is, like I said, to get ahead. But that means you're always thinking about what you're doing relative to other people. You're getting ahead of whom? Who are you getting ahead of? Who are you racing against in that sense? And as long as you have this idea that, for you to do better, you must be better than these people, or you have to always try to to take yourself further and farther than what those other folks are, to try to get higher up on that pyramid, then you're not going to change that system, because
Yeah.
that's the thing, that you're trying to win this game. This is
Yeah.
constant belief that you can win this game, and this is gambling mentality, but you're gambling lives and livelihoods. You're gambling
Yeah.
health, you're gambling safety, you're gambling so much. You're gambling, the things that you would actually value, which would be people. I think you should value human
Yes.
life.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but you can't quite do that if the value of a human life is based off of what they produce. And you can't
Exactly.
quite do that if the value of a human life, you know, is in such a way that, you know, it is something that we have to kind of rethink in some ways. Like, I was talking to someone about how we had this idea of um, addiction. Where I grew up in Detroit, in the inner city, when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, there was a very big crack epidemic. And there was this thought that anybody who had, drug addiction, they were like throwaway people. They were not folks that you could ever save. They were not folks you could ever redeem. And it's just, if you make that choice in your life, then you have chosen to throw away your life, right? And it wasn't until I got older and I moved to a different country and I saw, well, actually, no, you can rehabilitate all kinds of people. People can be brought back from those things, um, you know, because it's just a matter of, are you going to put the energy and invest into that redemption process, that health process, getting them back, to where they can be themselves again. And I think because we didn't put that investment into people, we just basically said it's cheaper to throw them away, you know. And I had to do so much unlearning, just to
Mm.
understand that realistically, I had this capitalistic mentality when it comes to human life for a lot of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And you have to really start unpacking the things that you believe, unpacking the systems that you've been raised in, to be able to understand how you can change them. Because there has to be a better way, as you said. And I think until we can get people to understand that it's not a game you have to play, this is not, it's
Yeah.
rigged against you, and it's rigged against
Yeah.
most people. Um, so can we find a better way of doing this? Because this is not something that any of us are actually going to win, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I'm fully with you, because the thing is also that I don't blame the individual people for that mentality. I
Mm,
don't blame the individual people for like wanting to get ahead, because that's how we are brought up. That's what we are taught
mm,
from birth, that you have to be better than others in order to get ahead. And obviously, like for for groups of people who have been historically oppressed, um,
mm,
that becomes something where you're like, this is something that I have at least an illusion of control over. And I don't blame anybody who buys into that, right?
mm,
Because it's just such, like, there is such an existential threat to people in general,
yeah.
that everybody is feeling. And that's why we have a hard time also like standing united, because we're like, but I suffer too. And so that's everybody's sort of like reaction. And also like people who we call privileged, which because they are, because we are privileged in like many ways and then not
Mm,
privileged in other ways. But when you call, like, say, uh, 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 a person who has been struggling all their life,
mm,
right? Sort of like privilege, that's never going to resonate with them, because it's like, I've been
mm,
struggling all my life. I've been homeless. I've been this, I've been that. I have this chronic illness. I have, what have you, right? So it's the thing is that to me, it's just really, really this insecurity and this scarcity that is just so deeply ingrained in us, that this scarcity thing, it's a way of life. It's a way of thinking. It is something in our mind, in our psychology, in our bodies. Our bodies can feel the scarcity. It's our way of existing. And I think that this insecurity, it causes most of our problems. It
mm,
causes so, at least so much. It causes
Mm,
so much. It prevents us from working together, because obviously this whole like getting ahead of others is incompatible with building together. And
mm,
so our building together bits become very conditional, and they become very existing like in a bubble.
mm,
And it becomes very temporary.
mm,
We cannot see building together and collaborating and coexisting and stuff like that as a permanent state of being, because
mm,
that's a bubble that can just like burst anytime. Like we had the luck, we had the luxury to work together for this short amount of time, but when will this end? Because that insecurity, that scarcity, that exists, it
mm.
exists in us, it exists around us, and some of us are more lucky in that regard than others. But again, like I don't blame the individuals. Like
No, no.
generations upon generations upon generations, like these systems are so old and they're so deep, but we
Y-
do have to change like both the way that we think in some way and the
mm.
systems that promote that thinking. Like we cannot just do one or the other. I don't think
No,
it's,
I
yeah.
think, but scarcity is one of these things. It's a manifestation of fear. That scarcity mentality. It's a manifestation of fear, right? And people, we oftentimes are guided by fear. Probably it's one of the main drivers of our behavior is what are we afraid of? That determines what we're going to be open to, it determines what we're going to run away from, it determines so much of our behavior. But fear has a place. Fear does keep you alive to a certain degree, but it won't help you
Exactly.
live. It won't help you live.
No.
Okay. So I think, and so I'm never going to fault the person from thinking of from a place of fear if that's where they are, you know. But the reality is most people don't reevaluate where they are to understand if what they're afraid of is something that they need to still be afraid of, if what they're afraid of ever made sense to be afraid of. They're not going to be able to think about, what are the realities and the opportunities of where they are. So I think one thing I would love to see people to kind of get back to is shifting from thinking from a fear mentality to a hope mentality if you possibly can. You know,
Mhm.
what's something
Mhm.
to not just run from in your life, the interactions, the people, the connections,
Yeah.
those kind of things to run from. What's something you want to run towards? What is
Yeah.
it that you're hoping towards or working for? Because if you find that this is what your goals are, these are the things that you want to build, this is what you want to create in this world, and you realize other people are trying to get to that point too, that opens up the opportunity for collaboration. That opens up the opportunities for
Yeah.
be able to work together with more people and to be able to create more
Yeah.
change. But as long as you think from a fear idea, this fear concept, and that's going to give you this whole scarcity mindset, you're not going to ever get to that point. You're never going to run towards or reach that place that you're going to feel comfortable, you're going to feel safe, you're going to be, and create what you want in this world. So you're going to have to at some point make that mental shift and think about what is that hope that you're going to go towards,
Yeah.
because it's hard to reach it with anybody else if you don't even know where you're going.